So much going on in college football across the nation, of course, with comings and goings, both at the coaching level and then, of course, the players are scattering and extending that transfer portal window. Always got to check in with the Georgia Bulldogs, arguably the best program in all of college football, despite not three-peating this year. We got Anthony Dasher here from UGAsports.com on Rivals. Anthony, how's it going?
Hey, Mark, doing well.
All right. Well, yes. I still think that everyone still believes that this was the best football team in the country. Not everyone, but
Yeah,
man, if I could have seen just one more game be played, that would have been Michigan, Georgia.
yeah. I think a lot of people probably would have agreed with you on that. But again, that's just not the way it was able to work out this year. Just had too many, unbeaten teams, too many one-loss teams that were conference champions, and based on the way the committee had talked about how they're going to determine this thing, there just really wasn't room for Georgia. You know, even though again, like I said, if you would have put both teams on the field, right now, I think a lot of people might have picked the Bulldogs to win. But again, that's something we don't have to worry about moving forward because of the 12-team playoff.
Exactly. A whole different deal. No Florida State, Georgia issue, Ohio State, all sorts of one-loss teams would have that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I've seen Carson Beck listed as the best quarterback in the country coming back. Of course, Georgia looks to be everyone's number one for next season. Do you think people are making a lazy projection just since that's what the consideration, or if you really take a deep dive on the talent coming back, that this team is stacked again?
Well, when you have success like Georgia had, that is an easy choice to make. I mean, I will admit that we saw that for years with Alabama. When Alabama won a national title, I mean, people would put them up near the top. And I would suspect, even though Michigan's got their turnover now with Jim Harbaugh leaving, you still will see a lot of people think Michigan's his number one team. But yeah, I think Georgia, getting Carson back, back for one more year is a huge deal. I mean, is he the best returning quarterback in the country? I don't know about that, but I think he's up there. And you look at the weapons that Georgia will have returning, next season, even with Brock Bowers moving on to the NFL, Georgia is going to be a pretty good offensive team. And so yeah, I mean, it doesn't shock me to see people considering that. But again, like all teams, they're going to have some holes they need to fill. I think maybe more so on the defensive side, but they've got potential to be another very good team.
They, of course, lost a lot of guys in terms of quantity.
Mm-hmm.
Out of that transfer portal list of losses, is there anybody in particular that you think hurts?
I don't know. Jamon Dumas Johnson was a starting linebacker. And of course, he lost his job after he got hurt, didn't come back to play. But again, that's a position that Georgia's just so stacked at right now. Man, they've got a lot of talented guys now. A lot of them, are inexperienced. But again, we're talking former 5-star players who are stepping into the rotation, and it's not like they're going to be hurting athletically, whatsoever. But otherwise, I mean, Xavier Story would have played, I guess, a role as a backup linebacker, and maybe a couple of receivers would have been in the rotation. But there's nobody who they lost. So I think, man, Georgia is losing a star. How are they going to replace that guy? Because that's just not the case.
This is not a first, but I think seeing a Trevor Etienne, and this is obviously a much bigger loss for Florida than it is a gain. And I'm not saying it's not a
Sure.
substantial gain for Georgia because he's a
Sure.
heck of a player.
Yeah.
But to see player movement all over the place, we're getting used to that. But when it's a rival of that degree, that's going to be hit people a certain way, I think, this year, seeing
That
him.
stings if you're Florida. I mean, that's like Georgia's probably the worst option that he could have chosen. I think if you ask most Gator fans right now, because I tell you this I still think Florida is the biggest rivalry that Georgia. I think Florida's the biggest rivalry that Georgia has right now. I know Georgia Tech is obviously up there, Tennessee is there, but there is just some hatred that's going on. We talk about Georgia and Florida after all, throughout all these years, and to have Edie and Trevor come to Athens from Gainesville, man, I know that hurts those fans a ton.
So you alluded to the Harbaugh decision, and we see it where the transfer portal has a certain window, but
Yep.
with coaching vacancies, and we just saw a complete domino effect off the Nick Saban retirement. where it opens up Alabama, and then Kalen DeBoer moves from Washington. Jed Fish goes from Arizona to Washington. The San Jose State coach, Brent Brennan, leaves San Jose State, goes to Arizona. So you got 4 schools all of a sudden that are open with players. And now it's going to be Michigan. We'll see what the fallout is. A ton of their players, they've got like 22 draft eligible players. So it might not be quite what it was at Alabama and Washington. But do you expect Georgia to look at over those players at all?
Yeah, I'm sure they'll take a look. And again, it will depend on kind of who goes in. I haven't really seen a list of guys yet who have announced for the portal, so it's kind of hard to say. But yeah, but Coach Smart will always have his eye out. If there's somebody I think they can come in and they can plug in and help their roster right now, they'll certainly, give it a long look. But, Georgia right now, by our count, is like about 89, 90 guys on scholarship right now. So they're going to have to drop like 5 players by the time, fall practice gets underway. So we'll have to wait and see. It have to be, I think, a special situation. Again, unless it's somebody, just some superstar stud out there that's going to be anybody would be a fool to turn down. But really, right now, I'm not really expecting Georgia to add any more players.
Were you surprised that Caleb Downs did not choose Georgia?
Yeah, because we were told he was going to pick Georgia. And from inside the program, that was the expectation. But with the NIL deal, we understand he got from Ohio State. It's certainly understandable why he picked the Buckeyes. I mean, Georgia, I think I might have mentioned on this show before. I mean, Georgia, NIL is fine. They've got plenty of money, but Coach Marty is just not one is going to want to pay a ton of cash to some of these kids. I mean, he's not going to pay a player more than what his assistant coaches are making right now. I can tell you that for a fact. And I think that would be something I think all schools are going to be kind of, not wanting to do that, to be quite frank. That could create some problems if you got players making more than your assistant coaches are right now. I think that's one thing that Coach Smart was kind of looking at there.
For as much as we've talked about NIL and all of that business on here, that is a really good point that may kind of cap this. That if coaches are really understanding, hey, the long-term success of this program and the health of the locker room and stability over just, okay, I want the best running back in the country and he's going to cost me $3.5 million, that might suppress this in a way that's kind of natural and healthy.
Yeah.
That guys are still going to get paid and paid substantially, but let's keep the hierarchy in order that the coaches should be making more than the players.
Yeah, I think it's, I would think would probably wind up that way, but again, you never know. But I also think too, though, I mean, a lot of these numbers I've seen thrown around for some of these guys, NIL deals, I think have been vastly overstated. I don't think you're seeing anybody making $3.5 million, $2.5 million. The most I've heard, I mean, I'll tell you, for Caleb Downs, I heard he's getting in the range of 1.2 million. That's kind of the number that's been tossed around from our side of things, I guess, if you want to call it that, where Georgia was not willing to approach anywhere near that, maybe half of that, for example. So I just think, again, when you're talking about a player making more than a coach, I think that's something that's going to be up to each individual coach that's out there to make that kind of decision. But I just think that from a personal standpoint, that could really create some problems. I think you're going to see coaches schools take a long look at that before they decide they want to pay some of these players these exorbitant amounts of money that some have already saying they're getting.
Again, I think that's a great point. I just can't imagine any head coach understanding the dynamics of a team and a locker room is going to think that player is worth it for 1 or 2 years to disrupt a lot and a culture and everything we've got going here. So that's a good point.
Yeah, for example, Travis Robinson, who Georgia's hired as their new safeties coach, co-defense coordinator from Alabama, his salary is $1.5 million per season. And again, Kirby certainly wasn't going to have Caleb Downs approach that with any kind of deal from UGA.
We got Anthony Dasher here. You can catch his work on UGAsports.com on Rivals. The ACC schedules were announced this week. Kind of strange to see 17 teams in a league with Cal and Stanford and
Thursday
SMU.
games, whatever they're doing, yeah.
Yeah, but the one that's going to catch everybody's attention, these two got together, of course, to start out 2021, and lo and behold, it turned out to be a Georgia National Championship season with a different quarterback than started that week 1 game against Clemson. DJ Uiagalelei on the other side and JT Daniels for Georgia in a pick 6. I don't remember who made the pick 6.
That was Christopher Smith made the pick 6. Yes,
that's right. And so, yeah,
Only
Christopher
touchdown of
Smith
the
with
game.
the that decided the ball game 10-3.
Yeah.
So these two get together, and you know as well as anyone, uh, the the fan base is kind of mixed. They're closer than I think people around the country
Oh yeah.
understand how close these campuses are.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, you take I mean, Georgia Tech in Atlanta is like maybe 75 miles away. Clemson is just 90. And these two schools used to play every year before again, Clemson went to the ACC and things, kind of got split up as far as non-conference, deal goes. But now you're seeing Georgia play, Clemson a little bit more. They played them a couple of years ago. They've got the game coming up to kick off there next year. And then on down the road, Georgia and Clemson have, I think, got like 4 home and home schedule of each other coming up in years to come. So you're going to see a lot more of this rivalry, which I think is a very good rivalry. It was always one of the better ones. I think, back in the early 80s, when Danny Ford was coaching the Tigers, of course, Coach Dooley, two programs go way back, and so I think it's a great thing. This is one. If it were up to me, I'd like to see this game played every season.
Yeah, for those of us who grew up on watching Herschel Walker,
Yeah,
he had some of his great games against Clemson.
Homer George for
Lindsey's,
Clemson. I mean that whole crowd. I mean William the Refrigerator Perry. I mean Clemson's had some awesome players, over the years, and that was just again that was a fun rivalry again because of the proximity between the two programs.
yeah, I believe it was Lindsey Scott that made like a 90-yard catch to break open the game and turn it for Georgia in their national championship season in 1980. So a lot of great memories. And just about 10 years ago, when Mark Richt was still at Georgia, of course, they had a home and home, and those were two really good, exciting games as well. All right, Anthony, we appreciate you stopping by.
Yes,
Would
sir.
encourage everyone to step on over to rivalsugasports.com and catch Anthony's work right there.